1944. German tanks roll into the Ardennes forest of Belgium.
And at that point, the heavens open up and all hell breaks loose.
The next lane we came to, there is the only Tiger tank I ever saw.
They attack American lines in one last desperate attempt to change the course of the war.
And it started in one fell swoop, and we chased away the Americans. They dropped everything and ran away.
The Americans respond with one of the biggest and most daring armored counterattacks in the history of tank warfare.
There's tanks being hit, bang, 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 all over the place.
At stake is the fate of Western Europe. This is the Battle of the Bulge.
Now it's a matter of survival.
The Ardennes region on the Belgian-German border is a picture postcard of majestic forests, deep gorges, and rolling valleys. It's also a notorious killing ground. This rugged part of the European heartland is a gateway to France and the ports of the North Sea. Armies have fought here since Roman times. And in December of 1944, the Ardennes once again erupts, this time in one of the biggest and bloodiest armored clashes of the Second World War. December 16th, 5:30 a.m. German artillery breaks the pre-dawn calm. And soon after, more than 1,000 German tanks attack U.S. forces along a 140-kilometer front. Hitler's aim is to stop the Allied advance across France and Belgium toward the German homeland. Through the summer and fall of 1944, the Allies have pushed the Germans 850 kilometers across Europe. But now, as they near the German border, their supply lines grow thin, and the advance loses steam. Hitler hopes to capitalize on this and prepares a massive counterattack in the Ardennes. It's his last big roll of the dice. The German attack plan is to smash the weak American line along the German border with Belgium and Luxembourg and seize the bridges over the Meuse River, clearing the way for a push onto Antwerp.
Hitler gave a strategic goal, which was to capture Antwerp harbor and with that huge Allied supply dump. The second goal was basically more tactical. If he had succeeded in pinning down about 25 plus Allied divisions in the Ardennes which were resting, this would result in a tremendous amount of losses for the Americans and for the British and would eventually bring them back on the negotiation table.
The Germans estimate they have only 3 days before the Allies can mount an effective response in the Ardennes. They need to strike quickly with a massive, highly mobile armored force. They assemble 8 panzer divisions, over 1,700 armored vehicles, including hundreds of Tigers, and over 400 Panzer Mark V's, the deadly Panther. The Panther is armed with a high-velocity 75mm armor-piercing gun and is protected by 80 millimeters of sloping frontal armor that deflects incoming fire. It can do 30 kilometers an hour, even over the roughest terrain, giving it an edge in the tough winter conditions of the Ardennes. The Germans secretly muster their enormous armored force at night over 8 weeks and wait for bad weather to ground Allied warplanes. On the morning of December 16th, the temperature falls well below freezing, and there are snowstorms across the Ardennes. Everything is in place, and the Germans strike.
And it started in one fell swoop, and we chased away the Americans. The Americans dropped everything. Breakfast was still standing on the tables, and they dropped everything and ran away. They left huge amounts of equipment, fuel and shells. The bad Germans are coming. Let's run. That's kind of what it looked like.
The Germans catch the Americans off guard, and the shape of the Ardennes battlefront begins to change, giving rise to a name that will live in U.S. military history: the Battle of the Bulge. At the spearhead of this bulge is the 5th Panzer Army, attacking the weakest part of the American line, held by the U.S. 28th Division and the handful of tanks attached to them. The M4A3 Sherman is the U.S. force's main battle tank, and it's no match for the German Panther. The Shermans are light and fast, but carry a low-velocity 75mm main gun that cannot penetrate the Panther's heavy frontal armor. Their own frontal armor is just 51mm thick, making them highly vulnerable to the firepower of the Panthers. Spread across a front over 24 kilometers long, the 28th has only 32 Sherman tanks, 57 anti-tank guns, and thousands of battle-weary men.
The Ardennes was an ideal territory to accommodate tired troops, weary troops. During that time, the 28th Division received a steady stream of reinforcements from the States. So in other words, young soldiers that had just not seen active combat yet. That's why all these troops here that bedded down on the night from December 15 to 16, they were totally caught by surprise.
One of the exhausted soldiers holding the front line with the 28th Division is 23-year-old John Marshall of the 707th Tank Battalion.
When the bulge broke, we were just going to eat. This lieutenant comes with his club and he knocked all the mess kits out of your hand. Leave them lay, get on your tanks and assemble down at the bottom of the town. They were frozen. And the oil settles down to the bottom of the motor. The top of the motor has no oil at all, and the oil now is sludgy, and as a result, it wasn't going to move, and we couldn't get it started. And that's when the tanks pulled out on us. We started putting everything you're not supposed to do. I think we had 5 Bunsen burners on the motor and under the motor and everything else. And luckily, we finally got it started.
Marshall searches for the rest of his tank unit, unaware that the Germans have already broken through the 28th Division's line. But he's lost, and eventually joins 2 other Shermans in the same predicament.
2 other tanks were there when we got down there. The other 2 tanks saw us come down and they says, "We'll follow you." Well, we had no idea where we were going. I jumped out of our tank to guide our tank across the bridge. And when we were safely across, I pointed to the tank commander for him to do the same thing. He no sooner got over the bridge when there was a tremendous flash. The Germans under the bridge had hit him with a bazooka. And the other two tanks, they all got machine gunned when they climbed out of the tanks.
The 5th Panzer Army seems unstoppable. All that stands in their way are scattered pockets of U.S. forces, under-equipped, outnumbered, and in Marshall's case, completely lost.
We now were really on our own.